Tim Aston. I'm a band teacher here in Missoula County Public Schools, and we're about to start our annual All City Wings, All City Jazz Festival holiday concert. I'd like to welcome you here for that and appreciate your coming. We started using this church facility about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's so different, it's so much more comfortable than, oh, come on, everybody. Yeah. And it's a gorgeous venue and just so appropriate for a holiday festive concert. We are going to begin with the All City Winds, and under the direction of Mr. Dylan Dwyer from the Meadow Hill Middle School and the All City Winds.
We're going to start off with a piece tonight that is by Tchaikovsky. This was arranged by John Schuberg, and some of you may recognize it. It comes from the Nutcracker Suite. This is Trepak.
All right, we tried to knock off the flute section on the last one. It didn't quite work, so now we're going to feature the flutes on this next piece, Les Basques, and we're going to see if we can knock off some of their fingers now. As well as Nikki Manlove on the tenor saxophone.
Final selection for the winds before the jazz is the Toreadors March from Carmen. I don't think I properly introduced this young man on my left. Yeah, the guy with the tie. This is Mr. Randy Schechter. He is the band director at C.S. Porter Middle School.
All right, just a quick story that most of the students up here don't realize, or they know that I was in the group at one point in the All City Jazz, but what they don't realize is the first concert that we did when I was going to school was in the Southgate Mall. And I remember the first time I wore this very tie. And so I thought I'd wear this tie tonight for good luck, and here it is. So it's in its second All City Jazz concert, first time of the year. This next piece is entitled Rock Band. It's going to feature two saxophonists, Keenan Goodman and Shannon Bolton.
hit and bring you back to the 1970s with a nice medley. Anybody fan of Earth, Wind, and Fire in the group here? Okay, so we're gonna do Earth, Wind, and Fire now. And I was actually surprised to find that the middle school folks here also were fans of Earth, Wind, and Fire. So there must be some good parenting going on. And we aren't going to feature any soloists on this tune, but it's pretty heavy on the rhythm section and bass. This is Earth, Wind, and Fire dance mix.
written by not just Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn, actually. If you don't know who Billy Strayhorn is, he was Duke Ellington's kind of partner and assistant, business partner and writing assistant. He wasn't really a copier, but it was interesting, the story how they met, but I won't go into that now, but they did meet. Billy Strayhorn took the A train to go to Duke Ellington's place, and hence the song Take the A Train. But anyway, ever since they met, they became a musical partnership, kind of like Rodgers, Hammerstein, all that kind of stuff. And they wrote this tune together. This is about a doll that belonged to Duke Ellington's niece. This is called Satin Doll.
I like the mic. He doesn't like the mic, I like it. Oh, we see soloists with Gwen Lockman on the tenor sax and on the trumpet. We had Robbie Jacobson, yeah. Before we finish our concert, we have a combined piece that will feature many, many soloists. You got a little taste of it before the concert actually started. We had no time to rehearse the two groups together, and so we asked, and most of you parents were very gracious in getting them here a little bit early, so we can have a little run through on the whole piece. This final selection, the Holiday Extravaganza, is that what you called it? The Holiday Medley. Anyways, it was arranged by Mr. Randy Schechter. For years we had the privilege, or at least the good fortune to have John Schubert, who arranged so many pieces for the All-City Winds, for the All-City Jazz, and so many other things that we've done in Missoula County Public Schools. And now we have a young man who is actually John's mentor and has really, he was your mentor. You're the mentee, little baby. Anyway, Randy's just come up and has just come up with a wonderful final selection, the Holiday Medley. I would like to make one announcement. MCT is recording this concert and will be shown somewhere in the Christmas area. And MCAT, sorry, thank you, MCAT. Anyway, talking with the cameraman, he said there will be DVDs, or if you want to request a tape, but there will be recordings available of the concert by MCAT for a cost of $10, somewhere around the 20th, 21st. Give MCAT a call and let them know, which concert you're interested in, and they should be available if you'd like to get a recording, or at least the MCAT's recording of this evening's concert. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Randy Schechter and the combined All-City Wind, All-City Jazz Holiday Medley. Once again, thank you so much for coming. We are done with our rehearsals. We meet again the first Monday in January when we come back, so that you folks have a little more time, not so many things to run around with. I think that's it. Cool.
All right, this next piece is going to feature in no particular order Mr. Josh Harrison, Mr. Jordan Dodson, Coulter Murphy, Jimmy Bakari, Nathan Jewett, Daniel Harvala, Gilia Patterson, Jessica Bixby, Janae White, Julia Dunn, Chad Engstrom, Chris Everett, Maddie Roy, Marissa Simmel, and Zach Blue, in no particular order.